Welcome everybody to Increase Your Closing Percentage, presented by myself, Caleb Wolf, as well as Richard Muss. We're gonna do a little bit of intros here on this slide, and then we'll take you right into the presentation. So a little bit about me. I've been with DocuWare going on almost 4 years. I think June will be 4 years for me. Before that, I worked in the copier industry for 10 years in various roles, from a down the street rep to a sales manager to a solutions director, where I actually sold DocuWare for about 1.5 years, 2 years before getting this role as regional sales director. I am based out of Boise, Idaho, and I cover the Northwest region as well as the western half of Canada. Rich?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Rich Moss. I am a regional sales director for DocuWare here in the New York metro area. I've been with DocuWare since 2015, just celebrated my 5-year anniversary. Real happy about that. And I've been in the document management world since 2007. We're looking forward to working with everyone today and sharing the knowledge that both Caleb and I have gleaned over the years, and that we've been in the space. And we hope that this is informative, and at the end of the day, that it's going to help you all increase your sales. So at that, Caleb, let's get it going.
Awesome. I should have had a little agenda slide ready for you guys. But just to let you know how it's going to go, we're going to do a lot of talking, obviously, and then at the end of this, we will have a questions and answers sort of segment. So insights from the field. I was trying to figure out. I've been in most of your shoes as a DAC, working with other reps who would bring me leads, and I'd go in and qualify and demonstrate the product and try to sell it. And I can't tell you how much I've learned over the last 4 years being involved with the manufacturer, and that's all I do day in and day out. But I was interested in pulling some numbers, and I didn't pull these numbers to like impress you or anything. I just wanted to, impress upon you that there is a lot of experience, and we've seen a lot of what we're going to talk about today in action. We know it works, and we're hoping that you can just take away a little bit. Don't judge me too much for putting a decimal and 2 zeros on the 10 million and then no decimal on the other one. That was my bad. So between the two of us, we've been involved in more than $10 million worth of DocuWare revenue, and we're just shy of 1,000 transactions, which this was kind of mind blowing to me. I would have never thought that it was that many, but I think sometimes you take for granted. We're just in the trenches doing demos and discovery calls and selling the product day in, day out. But that does lead to a lot of experience, and I try not to take that for granted. So we've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. I should have put like good, better, best here or something, but my whole point in here is there's like 2 things that we really see successful partners do, and that there's 2 things. One you have control of, the other one you may be able to help get control of. One is executive sponsorship. If the leadership of your organization, the president, depending on your hierarchy and everything, if they are all on board and they're all in on DocuWare, critical component to the success of a partner. Number 2 is the DAC. That is you guys that are on the call. This is why we do DocuWorld. We try to increase the sales enablement of the DocuWare channel, right? So you guys, if a company that has a great DAC, somebody who can qualify a prospect, can ask the right questions, can demonstrate the product to show how that solves the issues that they're having, can ask closing questions and get contracts signed, and then pass it off to an implementations team, that's the person that we need. If we have any successful partner that you look at has those 2 things, executive alignment and a good DAC. You guys have full control over one of those, and that's to be the best DAC that you can be, to take the information that we're going to share today and try to implement it and use it to increase your salesmanship. it's important that the DAC has the respect of the sales team. If you can't lead a conversation and you can't demo the product and you can't walk a customer through a process, your sales team isn't going to have the confidence to give you more leads, which we also understand is a big issue within the partner channel, is how do we get more leads? A lot of that comes back to your skills and capabilities. So we want to make sure that you understand from our perspective, those are the two vital elements that a partner needs. And if you don't have executive alignment, go hit your presidents and say, hey, I need you to have a talk with my regional sales director because he says I need your sponsorship in order for us to really grow this business. Get on with your regional sales director, have that conversation at a C-level type conversation, and let's figure out how we can move the business forward. So we're going to take you through the process, right? Pretty much kind of 4 steps with a few steps in between. But I want to be clear on the part that where we're picking up at. We're saying that a rep has brought you into an account and you're now sitting down with the customer to qualify the opportunity and perhaps do a demo the same day, perhaps not. But this is your first conversation with the prospect. So where do we start? Obviously, we got to start with asking questions. What type of questions are those? So we have general questions and we have document management questions. Obviously, do your research beforehand. Don't just have the rep grab you, you guys get in the car, you run down there, and you don't know a first thing about the company. Like, you need to know, what do they do, maybe some mission values. You don't know how you're going to use those in your conversation, but don't just go in completely blind and, hey, tell me about your company. Like, you want to start with, hey, I noticed this. Tell me a little bit more about that, or something to let them know that you've invested at least a little bit of time. But we are here to talk about document management. So we need to ask them questions, and we're calling these situational questions. And everything we talk about today is going to be done in order. So we need to start here with the situation. Here's some great examples. How are you managing your documents right now? You're going to get tons of different answers on that. What kind of document management system are you currently using? A lot of times at this point, they will say we're not using one. Everybody's using one, whether that's paper on their desk, file cabinets, Windows folder structure. Everybody's using some sort of document management system. Don't make them feel stupid, but say something to the point of, if they say, well, we don't have a document management system, and maybe say, so, oh man, I asked that poorly. How do you manage your documents? Like, are they in file cabinets? Are they in Windows folder structure? Like, are they in both? Are they all loaded in email? Like, what does your environment look like? What are their line of business applications? Find out what their accounting package is. Do they have a HRMS system? What's their CRM if they have a CRM? Mission critical workflows. Great question to get the mind flowing, what we're talking about here. Which would you put at the very top of your list, right? We need to find out why we're here to have a conversation. Help me understand your paper environment. So there's a lot more than this, but here's some examples of situational questions. So the key points on this part is we don't want to ask too many of these. You don't want to spend 20 minutes asking situation questions. They can become impatient. You could bore the prospect. You lose your credibility. So do your research in advance. Don't ask questions that you can't get from research. And my favorite is don't sound scripted. You'll notice as I go through this whole PowerPoint, like, this is not scripted for me. Like, I hate going in with, a pen and paper and 20 questions that I need to ask the prospect. Like, that's something you might give your sales rep a job of doing. But if you ask, what are some mission critical workflows, and they talk about work orders, you don't want to go down a accounts payable track or an HR track. You may have all these predefined questions that you were going to ask, but they're not relevant to the prospect. Let's just ask them questions relevant to what they're doing. So after we've got the lay of the land, we've asked our situation questions, then it's going to lead us to problem questions. I'm going to let Rich take over on the problem questions.
Thanks, Caleb. So, once you've gathered reasonable information on the customer situation, and to Caleb's point, remember, you don't want to go overboard on these questions because they can be perceived as being too invasive. You're just trying to get a background with those questions. You want to get an understanding now of what the prospects or the customers' problems or challenges are. Asking problem type questions gets that prospect to open up about difficulties with their current processes. And as with any question we ask, we want them to be open-ended so they will give you more information. The most successful DACs will ask a lot of these types of questions, and when properly asked, problem questions will get the prospect to state an implied need. So in the small to mid-sized business world that we all live in, data has shown that the more implied needs that your customer shares with you, the better your chances are of closing the business without the need to go further into these explicit needs. An implied need is a statement the customer shares with you describing their unhappiness with the current process or unhappiness with current procedures. And by uncovering more of these implied needs, what the customer is actually giving you are really strong buying signals. This doesn't hold true in a larger opportunity. And when we're talking larger opportunities, we're looking at, again, in our world, $50,000 opportunities and above. The implied need in those situations is the starting point that you're getting to develop into explicit needs. So some of these implied needs are, I'm unhappy about wastage rates. The system can't cope with throughput. Our current document management system is slow when searching for documents, or the current AP process causes late payments. When speaking with a prospect, there's a natural tendency to talk about the features of the solution. You're sitting there, you're having a conversation with them, and as they're telling you things that they're having a problem with, you can automatically say, oh, well, we can do that, we can do that. I still catch myself doing that every once in a while. A better approach is to think about the solution of what we're offering and all the problems it can solve for the customer. And if we think along those lines, you can then develop a very strong line of problem-solving questions that are going to draw more information out of the customer and get to those explicit need statements, which you're then going to be able to address when you get to that point of a presentation. And you don't want to get to that point yet, but again, this is what we're building to at this point. So explicit needs, what are they? So they are statements made by the customer that demonstrate a specific want. As I mentioned earlier, explicit needs are the best predictor of sales success in larger opportunities. The implied need that your customer is going to share with you are the building blocks for that. The implied need also in your larger opportunities aren't buying signals. When understanding the seriousness of a customer's problem, the second part of the challenge is making sure the cost is in line with that challenge. In summary, implied needs are dissatisfaction with a process or a procedure. It helps the customer build to an explicit need. And these types of questions really do hinge upon the size of the opportunity. Caleb?
Perfect. So before I go to what's next, I want to take you back here just for a second, because I have to see things multiple times. And when I see implicit and explicit, for me, it doesn't just come to me like, oh, what is the difference between implied versus explicit? I think Rich explained it very well. I have to see things like 2 or 3 times to make it make sense. So I want to hit, and I'm just going to go from this slide to the next slide and back to this slide, so to really hone in on that difference, because you will hear a lot of times as you're during your situation, your problem questions, you'll hear a lot of answers like, yeah, so what are some of the pains that you're experiencing? Well, our present system just can't cope with the throughput, or I'm not happy about the wasted time we're spending on searching for documents, or we're not satisfied with the speed of our process. they're going to give you lots of these questions, right? But in our mind, we're not thinking, oh, that's an implied need. Oh, that was an implied need. Oh, that was an implied need. But we need to be cognizant that they haven't really told us what they want yet. They've told us our present system can't cope with the throughput, but what's the explicit need? Well, if I go to the next slide, we need a faster system. That's an explicit need. What we're looking for is a reliable machine. I'd like to have backup capability. Those are the phrases that you want to be in tune with and notate, like when you're having the conversation. The customer said we need a faster system. Well, how powerful is that in your presentation when you're doing your demo to say, hey, we noticed you said you needed a faster system, right? So you can talk about a couple of those. So real quick, implied, can't cope with, I'm unhappy, we're not satisfied. Explicit, we need a faster system. We're looking for a more reliable machine. What's next? So we've sat down with the customer. We've asked them all these problem questions. The customer gives us examples like this. And the reason I go here is because I've done this and I've been here a number of times. A lot of times, especially if we're talking AP, hundreds of calls, I've had customers tell me the exact thing that I want them to tell me because my software solves the exact problems that they're having. So you're having a conversation with the customer. They tell you all the problems. They give you some explicit needs. Yeah, I just really need something, a system that would automate a lot of these processes. Well, there's our explicit need. What does that process look like? Well, I've got invoices that come in, email, snail mail. They print off the emails. They go hand them to these guys that need to approve them. It sits on their desk for 3 weeks, and it comes back. So I can't tell you how many times I've been listening to a customer, and then right now I'm like, demo time. Like I've got them. Like they're hooked. Like I know once I show them my demo, there's no way they're not buying my solution ever. Like because they just gave me exactly what my solution does. I can't tell you how many times I've thought that, how many times I've demoed the product, and how many times I have not sold the solution. So this is not where we do our demo. And I think this would be like one of my big things. We do not do our demo after we've gotten some problem questions and some problems and essentially just the lay of the land and the problems. The next is we need to get the implications to those problems. Probably the hardest thing, and in the book, it talks about how every part of this process is important, and the sales reps that do the next step have a higher success rate than the ones that don't ask these questions. So implications. What is an implication? I don't want to make this complicated. It's not complicated. The customer just told us what they need in their explicit needs. What is the impact that your current process is having on your organization today? What is the impact? And let them talk. The second bullet point is important. When a prospect answers an implication question, they should feel that the problem is larger and more urgent than they originally felt. Many people know that they have a problem, but they haven't really thought about it long enough to truly figure out what is the impact that has on their organization. This is where you take your salesmanship to the next level. I love the phrase, what impact is that having on your organization? There's no way that throws somebody for a loop. Like, oh, well, what do you mean? Well, you just told me all of the issues with the bottlenecks and the pain points, but what is the impact? What are you guys experiencing because of that? Well, the employees are just frustrated. Okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that. So you got to get them talking. This is the hardest part, and it's going to take practice, and you have to think in your mind, man, I sat in that DocuWare training where they talked about how to increase sales ratio, and they mentioned this implication stuff, and you're going to go back and do a couple more demos or a couple more calls, and you'll still skip over this part. But force yourself, hey, what impact does that have on your business? And when they tell you, you need to get deeper because they will say super vague stuff like what I just said. So if they give you a vague answer, you need to get them digging deeper. If they tell you, well, our guys just spend too much time. Well, how much time do they spend? Like, have you ever really thought about that? How much time are they spending on this? But a lot of times the impact is not necessarily just tied to hourly time. I've had conversations that took it down to reputation in the marketplace, the speed at which they're growing, the marketability of their company. Like when you get down to those sort of impacts, now we're talking, almost intangibles sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to quantify. Sometimes you can't put a dollar amount on it. But if you're talking to the right level of person and you've got their agreement, you can still use that in your presentation or in your proposal. So I kind of already talked about this. Every step is tied to, increasing the sales and close percentage. The big thing to remember is that, so you guys are sitting in front of a prospect, you're doing the same thing you've always done, but you've got these RSDs that are telling you, hey, I need to do a little bit further on this. Just remember negative on implications. What effect does that have on? How often does that cause? What does that result in? When does that ever lead to? So my big takeaway here, I like the what impact does that have? You can't lead them to what the negative thoughts or negative things that are happening to their business because of what they told you. So I call it leading the witness. And every time I see a DAC do this, I want to say objection, like right in the middle of the call, but I would never do that to you guys. But the whole point is you can't tell them, well, I'm sure you're not getting all your early payment discounts. I can't tell you how many times people have said, no, we get all of our early payment discounts. Those are the invoices we process right away because that's what we want to capture. You don't want to divulge that they should be having issues with early payment discounts. They should have issues with duplicate invoices. They should have invoices with vendor onboarding. No, we don't want to mention all that. We want to get them to tell us what the impact of having a manual AP process is on their organization. And if they can't think of anything and you need to get them thinking, then you can adjust, well, I've seen this in other organizations. Do you have any issues when it comes to blah, 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 blah? Just don't assume. So after you've asked your implication questions, you showed some massive discipline and you didn't jump into the demo even though it felt so good and you wanted to, and you asked a couple of implications or a few implication questions, and you feel like you've got some good answers here. And the first time you do this, you're not going to knock it out of the park. You're going to hear them give you a couple of implications, and then you're going to move on, and you're going to go back to your notes afterwards and be like, oh man, I should have gone deeper on that one. I should have gone deeper on that one. And that's what we want. Practice, practice, practice. So after the negative implication questions, we need to go to the last step, which is our need payoff questions.
Thanks, Caleb. So need payoff questions they're designed to ask about the value or usefulness of solving a problem. Basically, it's almost like a return on investment to the customer. If we don't show them the value of what we're discussing with them, we're not going to close that opportunity. We're not going to close that deal with the customer. And when properly presented, they get the prospect thinking about the solution rather than the problem. And by doing this, you're creating a positive problem-solving atmosphere rather than focusing on problems and difficulties. And what happens when we're going down this line of questioning is the customer is going to respond to payoff questions and tell you the benefits that the solution is going to provide. The need payoff question is especially helpful in existing customer relationships, and you can use this to upsell in your opportunities. These questions are really powerful selling tools in larger sales because they also increase the acceptance of your solution. And what's also important to remember is success in these large sales depends on an internal champion selling internally for you. And with these need payoff questions, it's one of the best ways to work with your customer, with your champion, that they can go in and they can present to others and help you build throughout the organization with this type of a solution. So what we're looking at here is I'm not going to read all these questions to you, but there is a common thread when you look at these questions that are running through these. Is there any way? How would this help? Why is this important? What's common in all of these questions is something that's referred to as Quincy's rule. What Quincy's rule is, basically in summary, it's how do we know the difference between an implication question and a need payoff question? And so what Quincy's rule is, the name comes from a little story about a child who was talking with his father about these types of questions. And the father was actually having difficulty in figuring which was an implication and which was a need payoff question, probably overthinking it as we all do. So when he was talking to the child about this, the kid's name was Quincy, he actually looked at the questions and, that the father was mulling over, and he simply said that the implication question are sad questions and the need payoff questions are happy questions, from out of the mouths of babes, right? So to put it in adult terminology, implication questions are problem centered and they're going to make the problem more serious. The need payoff questions are solution centered. So they're showing the value of solving that problem for the prospect. It takes a little bit of practice to successfully use this line of questioning. But if you use the happy, sad question, model throughout the process, it's going to be a lot easier for you to master this. And, as Caleb had said, the whole key to this whole process that we're talking about today is really, it's practice. It's just constantly going over there, thinking about the questions prior to going into the customer and really understanding them, understanding the impact of right from the beginning of the questioning, from the whole solution of the customer down to the need payoff, and hopefully we can we've helped you out with this. Caleb, I'm going to throw it back to you.
So I'm not going to give you a quiz on implications versus needs payoff, but I do want to talk about, at the end, when you test out of this, you do need to know some specific things about our session. So I'm going to share with you some of the information that you will need to know. I do remember when I was first doing this training, I think it's almost 3 years ago, on the negative and positive. I remember, rather than say what's the impact of, you could also say, so what are the negative side effects of your current workflow process? If I was able to put in a solution that automated that, what positive effect would that have on your organization? So the negative, positive, this goes to the psychology of selling, right? You want to go from negative, and you don't want to leave on a negative. You want to leave on a positive, and talk about, can they envision what their life would be like when they have this solution in place? You want to get them feeling that. So some of the questions, you need to be able to discern a needs payoff question from an implication question. You just follow Quincy's rule. It shouldn't be difficult. Multiple choice, 4 questions, find the one that's a needs payoff. Vice versa, find the one that's an implication. You need to know the acronym for SPIN. And the reason, SPIN's kind of got a few different views in the sales world. It's been around for a lot of years, but some people don't look at it as like a current model. It still works. It is a current model for selling a solution like that we sell. And knowing the acronym SPIN helps you when you're in the midst of doing a client presentation preparation call, your first discovery call. It helps you remember, oh man, have I asked my implication questions? Did I finish with some needs payoff? And back to what Rich and I both said, you need to practice, because it still happens to me today. Sometimes I'll get an autopilot, I'll go in and I'll totally space implications and needs payoff. The order is important. That'll probably be on there as well. You can't go straight into an implication question. Nobody wants to sit down with a guy that goes straight into, hey, what's the negative impact of what you're doing today on your organization? No, build that trust. Be a consultant, right? Don't be scripted, and you're there to help them in any way you can, hopefully through utilizing our solution. So those are some questions that'll be on the test. In conclusion, your demo VM can be a crutch. Just sticking to the demo shell, that's kind of what we designed it for. It's a great utility, shows a lot of different capabilities, but don't allow it to be a crutch and all of a sudden you want to get into the demo as fast as you can because you know your VM pretty well and that's your comfort space. Get out of that comfort space a little bit. Ask some of those more challenging questions. Conscious controlling of questioning. Beautiful phrase right there. Conscious control of questioning. You're there to accomplish a job. You're there to lead a prospect through a sales cycle. And it is incredibly difficult to have your second, like what do you call that? Human nature be to go straight into implications and needs payoffs, but that's where you want to get to. Getting the customer to provide explicit needs and implications is the silver bullet. It truly is. If you can't get somebody to admit the implications, I would call them not all in. Like if they can't even articulate to you what the impact of what their current structure is having on their organization, you're either not talking to the right person or they don't necessarily believe that there's room for advancement. So it's going to trim down sales cycles. It's going to weed out the ones that would have never bought in the first place. Very critical to the sales process. And I think we perceive it in our mind's eye. We make up excuses for ourselves. The customer doesn't want to talk about all that. It's impossible to get return on investment out of a customer. Customers don't want to divulge the nickel and dimes of this guy spent 1 hour and 30 minutes trying to find a document 5 times this week, and this leads to this many dollars. You know, I would agree with you. In most cases, that's not the impact. But if you haven't asked the implication questions, you're never going to get to the true impact. Does the CFO really care about that hour, 30 minutes a week? Maybe a little bit, but he's probably more interested in say you're having a compliance conversation. I was talking to one that was Medicare funding and incident reporting. And the implication for them was if they don't follow a specific path based on the incident report, that if they get audited and find out that, hey, this incident, the guardian was supposed to be called within 24 hours and you don't have proof that you did that, you're facing heavy fines. And what I also learned was if they find one, now they look a lot more intently because that's saving them money, right? If they can find you and not have to fund you for your care, that's dollars, I guess, in their pocket. It's all government. But so we perceive it. People will answer these questions. If you'll just ask, very rarely do I ever find somebody who says, well, that's a little uncomfortable. I don't want to answer that question. Like they don't know. They want to know. They want you to help them figure out what impact that their current processes are having on their business and how we can possibly help them fill those needs. So there's my soapbox for you.
Just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and really hope that you take something away from what we discussed, and hopefully we get to see you all face to face next year at DocuWorld 2022.